In tonight's headlines, the government is to improve safety measures for workers in confined spaces following 2 deaths in a construction site last September. Reaction is mixed after the United Nations top court delivers an interim ruling on South Africa's genocide claim against Israel. And Arina Sabalenka defeats Zhang Qinwen in straight sets to retain her Australian Open title.
After inspecting more than 200 construction sites in the past 2 months, the Labour Department issued 400 improvement and suspension notices. It also instituted 200 prosecutions against firms which flouted labour rules as well as occupational safety and health regulations. This follows the deaths of 2 workers who were trapped in a confined space in a West Kowloon construction site last September. Labour Minister Chris Sun plans to announce a revised code of conduct in the first half of this year for those who work in confined spaces.
One idea we think is quite possible is to require the installation of cameras at the entrance to a confined space. So through cameras, that means there is literally no incentive for those working in confined space to cut corners, because all their entrance, all their behavior, all their equipment will be fully recorded on camera. So by this way, we hope they will be able to make sure that people have every incentive to comply with all the safety requirements for working in confined space.
One day after designated rubbish bags went on sale, Environment Minister Tse Chin-wan took to the airwaves to reveal that the government plans to set up massive bins near so-called 3 new buildings to make it more convenient for residents to get rid of their waste. These are buildings that do not have an owner's corporation, any form of residents' organization, or hired a property management company, which means no one is responsible for collecting waste. There are about 3,000 of them in Hong Kong. Residents will be able to dump their waste in huge bins that can hold up to 660 liters of rubbish. That said, when the waste disposal charge is implemented on August 1st, outreach teams will conduct site visits to see if residents can access recycling bins easily. If the recycling bins are far from those buildings, maybe we can set up mobile spots nearby, Zhe said. The teams will also visit tenants to help them learn about the charging scheme. The environment chief pointed out that supporting facilities, including recycling bins and food waste decomposers under the waste tax, will be rolled out in phases to reduce costs. Currently, private housing estates with at least 1,000 households can apply for a food waste decomposer from the government. Zhe suggested that buildings with fewer tenants can file a joint application with nearby estates and share the equipment. He also noted that some housing estates have already increased management fees ahead of the waste tax implementation. Zhe urged management firms to discuss charges with owners' committees, adding that the waste disposal scheme would not cause a substantial increase in operating expenses. Janice Low, Cable News. A 33-year-old babysitter has been arrested on suspicion of ill-treating or neglecting a 9-month-old infant. A medic in Tuen Mun Hospital filed a report last night after finding a blood clot in the brain of the little girl who was unconscious when she was admitted. One of her eyes was also swollen. Sources said a doctor believed that the injuries were not caused by accidents. The suspect looked after the baby during the day before her parents picked her up in the evening. The babysitter reportedly found the infant suffering from a seizure in the bath before the baby lost consciousness.
Infectious disease expert Ivan Hung has urged high-risk groups to receive vaccines against the XBB COVID variant as he expects cases to keep rising in the Lunar New Year. Speaking on a radio program, the government pandemic advisor pointed out that 80% of patients in wards for infectious diseases had contracted COVID. He said the public should opt for the mRNA vaccines for a higher degree of protection.
5針科興嘅人士都係重症入嚟嘅。
Even though people have received 5 Sinovac jabs, they could still be admitted to hospital because of severe COVID, Hung said. This is because the ancestral strain, which was used to develop Sinovac vaccines, has mutated into different forms, including Omicron and JN1.
Reactions have been mixed after the International Court of Justice delivered its interim ruling on South Africa's genocide case against Israel, which has virtually leveled the Gaza Strip in retaliation for a deadly Hamas attack last October. The United Nations Top Court, also known as the World Court, did not order a ceasefire, but sent a message to Israel.
The State of Israel shall, in accordance with its obligations under the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide in relation to the Palestinians in Gaza, take all measures within its power to prevent the commission of all acts within the scope of Article 2 of the Convention, in particular, A, killing members of the group, B, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, C, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, and D, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the charge of genocide is false and outrageous and failed to continue defending his country. Palestinians in Gaza struggling to cope with mounting casualties were disappointed that the International Court of Justice, the ICJ sitting in The Hague, did not demand a truce, but were grateful to South Africa for campaigning on their behalf.
The effect of the order that the ICJ has granted today is that there is a plausible case of genocide. This marks an important first in our quest to secure justice for the people of Gaza. It is our earnest hope and wish that this court order paves the way for an end to this crisis and this painful experience that Palestinians are going through.
Israel's unrelentless bombardment of Gaza has claimed more Palestinian lives, including at least 3 people who were killed when their house in Rafah was flattened in the latest wave of attacks. The Palestinian toll has reached 26,300 in Israel's response to a Hamas attack more than 3 months ago. There are now fears that a food shortage in Gaza will worsen after a number of Western countries suspended funding for UNRWA, the United Nations agency that looks after Palestinian refugees. This came after Israel claimed that some agency employees had taken part in the Hamas raid. The United Nations suspended some of the employees and launched an investigation. Hamas said Israel made the allegations to sabotage relief work in Gaza.
A missile fired by Houthi forces has hit a British tanker near the Red Sea, causing a fire but no casualties. The Marlin Luanda was hit about 100 kilometers southeast of the Yemeni port of Aden. US and British warships, which are patrolling the strategic waterway to protect shipping, responded to a distress call. The Houthis have been targeting Israel-bound cargo vessels in a show of support for the Palestinians in Gaza. The United States and Britain launched a series of air and naval strikes against the Houthis in a bid to stop the attacks.